pregnant wife was forced to watch her millionaire husband propose to Mistress years. Later, she got the last laugh. In a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Dallas, a woman named Amelia walked into the lavish foyer of an upscale hotel suite. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from the Texas heat, but from the painful shock gripping her soul. She was 7 months pregnant, her body already strained by the life growing within. Yet tonight, instead of celebrating the miracle of new beginnings, she would bear witness to an unthinkable betrayal. Across the room stood her husband Jason, rose in hand, gazing adoringly into the eyes of another woman. In that moment, Amelia realized her world was about to shatter forever. Amelia had grown up in a modest home on the outskirts of Dallas. Her parents taught her the value of hard work, empathy, and resilience. She was the eldest of 3 children, often taking on the role of caregiver for her younger siblings. From an early age, Amelia believed that love was sacred, a lesson instilled by her mother, who always said true devotion meant being there for someone through life's most painful trials. She carried this idealism into her adult relationships, searching for a partner who would share both burdens and joys with sincerity. Jason, by contrast, was the product of an entirely different world. He was born into a family of wealth and status. As an only child, Jason never lacked material comforts. His parents, entrepreneurs who owned several successful car dealerships, ensured he had the best education and upbringing money could buy. In high school, his friends jokingly called him the Prince, and although he often shrugged off the nickname, a part of him reveled in the attention. When he went on to attend a prestigious private college, he carried that sense of entitlement with him, believing that most things in life were his for the taking. Their paths converged one fortuitous evening at a charity event benefiting Mount Sinai Hospital's pediatric unit. Amelia had volunteered to help organize the raffle. She was busy handing out tickets when Jason strutted in, wearing a tailored navy suit and exuding confidence. For a moment, she was struck by his polished demeanor and the easy charm with which he greeted everyone. He noticed her, too, her kind eyes, the subtle curls of her hair framing her face, and the way she lit up when talking about charitable causes. Intrigued, Jason approached her booth, introduced himself, and asked a few questions about the hospital's fundraising goals. As the night wore on, he found himself drawn to Amelia's genuine concern for others. She wasn't dazzled by his wealth or family background. Instead, she engaged him in deep conversation about healthcare reforms, the needs of underprivileged children, and how everyday citizens could foster real change in their communities. When Jason offered to buy more raffle tickets than anyone else, Amelia laughed softly, telling him to save his money for future charitable ventures and not to treat giving as a game to be won. Her gentle rebuke kindled a fire within him. He realized she was unlike any woman he had met, grounded, sincere, and uninterested in superficial gestures. By the time the event ended, he was determined not to lose her. He asked for her phone number in the most polite manner he could muster, and Amelia, who felt an undeniable spark, graciously gave it to him. Their courtship was fast but intense. Jason showered Amelia with thoughtful gifts, but also showed genuine interest in her world. He visited her small apartment, met her siblings, and even helped her mother shop for groceries. Amelia, in turn, offered him a refuge from the high-pressure demands of his family's empire. She would listen patiently as he vented about corporate meetings and reminded him of the important things in life: love, connection, and empathy. 4 months into dating, Jason proposed in front of the iconic Reunion Tower, overlooking the glittering Dallas skyline. Amelia was stunned. They'd known each other for so short a time, but she felt in her heart that their bond was real and meaningful. With tears of joy streaming down her face, she said yes. The swirl of excitement carried them through an elegant ceremony at the Hilton Dallas Lincoln Center, where Jason's parents spared no expense. Amelia's family stood proudly by her side, and for a moment it all seemed like a fairy tale come to life. Yet underneath the polished veneer of their new marriage, faint red flags waved in the distance. Jason's temper would flare when things didn't go his way, and he had an unsettling tendency to treat his successes and, by extension, his marriage as trophies that proved his worth. Amelia, ever the optimist, dismissed these warning signs. She believed in the vows they had exchanged to love, honor, and cherish each other. In her mind, these small imperfections were bumps in the road that love and mutual respect could smooth over. For a time, it did seem like their union was an unbreakable fortress. Their families became interwoven, and Amelia grew close to Jason's parents, who began to see her as the grounding influence their son needed. She was welcomed into Dallas's high society gatherings, adjusting to the circles Jason had long navigated. It wasn't the lifestyle she had imagined, but she embraced it because it came with him, her husband, and the father to be of her future children. And though she couldn't yet envision how drastically life would change, she held on to hope that love would guide them both. In the early months of their marriage, Amelia truly believed she had found her forever partner. Even when she occasionally witnessed Jason's impatience with waitstaff at restaurants or the way he would scold his subordinates at the family business, she convinced herself that his stress levels were simply too high. She assumed his short temper was a product of the pressure he felt now that he was being groomed to expand the brand of dealerships nationwide. Still, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered that something wasn't quite right. She noticed the first real sign when Jason began coming home far later than usual from work. Previously, if a business meeting or emergency demanded his attention, he'd call or text to let her know he might be late. But in those weeks, he sometimes didn't even bother to inform her, slipping through the door at midnight with vague excuses about last-minute deals and dinner meetings that ran longer than expected. Amelia tried to be understanding, but each time she asked for details, Jason would become evasive, changing the subject or brushing off her concerns. Worse yet, Jason's phone suddenly became off-limits. Amelia had never been the type to snoop through her partner's devices. She believed wholeheartedly in boundaries and privacy. But his behavior shifted from casually leaving his phone around the house to clutching it as if it were a precious relic. He placed it face down on counters and took it with him even when he showered. One evening, as they prepared for bed, he received a text. Amelia jokingly asked who it was, and the look he gave her, cold, guarded, sent a chill through her body. He mumbled something about work stuff and walked away. The changes in Jason didn't stop there. For years, he had always been enthusiastic about their physical closeness. Suddenly, his passion waned. He avoided nighttime intimacy, claiming exhaustion from his demanding job. Amelia tried different approaches, planning a romantic dinner, surprising him with small gifts, or suggesting weekend getaways. Each effort was met with lukewarm acceptance at best. When she gently confronted him about her worries, he dismissed it all as paranoia. He patted her arm and said, "I love you, Amelia. You're overthinking," before promptly shifting the conversation to something else. Amelia's suspicions escalated when they attended a gala in support of the Dallas Children's Foundation. Jason spent most of the evening at the far end of the ballroom, mingling with business associates. Amelia, left to her own devices, floated among acquaintances, making polite chatter. During one of these conversations, she spotted Jason near the champagne fountain, talking to a statuesque blonde in a shimmering red gown. Their body language seemed electric, the woman leaning in, placing a hand lightly on Jason's arm. He didn't recoil instead. He let the contact linger in a way that felt intimate. Even from across the room, Amelia could sense an undercurrent, something that went beyond casual friendliness. Her heart pounded as she watched them share a quiet laugh. Just as she mustered the courage to approach them, Jason seemed to sense her gaze. He abruptly stepped back from the woman, adopting a more formal pose. Amelia tried to brush aside the knot in her stomach, attributing the closeness to the nature of networking events. But doubt took root in her mind that night, refusing to let go. Later, in the car ride home, Amelia hesitated for a long moment before asking, "Who was that woman in the red dress you were talking to?" Jason glanced at her, annoyance briefly flashing in his eyes before he forced a calm smile. "That was Vanessa Carter," he replied, emphasizing the name as if it should mean something. "She runs a marketing firm my father wants to collaborate with. Nothing more than a business discussion, I assure you." His words felt rehearsed, as though he had anticipated her question. That night, Amelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to quell the uneasy churning in her gut. In the days that followed, she noticed that Vanessa's name popped up more frequently. Jason mentioned a lunch meeting with her at a new high-end steakhouse downtown. Then, he supposedly had to attend an urgent pitch presentation at her office. Although none of these individual occurrences proved anything, they collectively chipped away at Amelia's sense of security. Every new detail felt like a piece of a puzzle she didn't want to complete. Soon after, a medical surprise threw yet another wrench into Amelia's emotional state. At her annual checkup, ironically scheduled months before she intended to start a family, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. Conflicting emotions assaulted her. She was thrilled because motherhood had always been a cherished dream, but the timing seemed precarious. Her marriage was on uncertain ground, and Jason's recent behavior left her worried about how he would react to this life-changing news. She mulled over telling him immediately, but a quiet fear held her back. What if this pregnancy pushed him further away? Or, worse yet, what if his distance confirmed her worst suspicions that his love and loyalty had already wandered elsewhere? Yet, Amelia's inherent optimism reasserted itself. She reasoned that a baby might be exactly what would bring them closer. After all, they had spoken so often about raising a family, creating a legacy rooted in love and generosity. Perhaps Jason was simply overwhelmed by his new responsibilities in the family business and the hype of networking in Dallas's competitive scene. She wanted to believe that once he knew about the baby, everything would snap back into place, like a painting that had been knocked askew, but only needed a gentle realignment. Hope is a powerful thing, but it can blind us to truths we don't want to see. Amelia clung to that hope, hoping that the secrets Jason guarded so fiercely would dissolve into irrelevance once he heard the news. Little did she know, her discovery of pregnancy would collide with an even more shocking revelation, leaving her heart in tatters at the very moment she needed stability and love. Amelia agonized over how to share the pregnancy news with Jason. She planned a simple but heartfelt reveal, an intimate dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, softly lit with candles, with her surprising him at dessert by presenting a tiny pair of baby shoes. In her mind, he would be elated, all tension forgotten. The dream scenario fueled her for days. But the reality, once it arrived, was nothing like the fantasy she had conjured. On the evening she chose for the announcement, Jason didn't come home until nearly 11. He breezed through the door, disheveled and reeking of perfume that wasn't Amelia's. "Work ran late," he said by way of greeting, tossing his jacket onto the couch. Amelia, who had waited anxiously for hours, felt tears prick the corner of her eyes. She had spent the entire afternoon cooking his favorite dishes, carefully plating them on the dining room table, only for him to ignore the spread. The candles had burned down to puddles of wax, and the baby shoes remained tucked away in her coat pocket, a secret still unspoken. Summoning courage, she gently took his hand. "Jason," I have something really important to tell you, she began. He pulled away from her touch, massaging his temples as though a headache pounded behind his eyes. Amelia, can it wait? I'm exhausted, he muttered. Her heart clenched. She had hoped for warmth, a spark of enthusiasm, anything to suggest he cared. In the silence that followed, Amelia couldn't hold back anymore. She retrieved the baby shoes from her pocket and held them out, her fingers trembling. I'm pregnant, Jason, she whispered, her voice quivering with a combination of joy and fear. He stared at the tiny shoes as though they were foreign objects. His eyes flickered with something shock or possibly even annoyance before he forced a faint smile. Wow, he said softly, but there was no genuine excitement. He leaned in to kiss her forehead in what felt like a perfunctory gesture. That's good news, Amelia. A strangled mixture of relief and disappointment flooded her. She had yearned for more than this subdued response. Exhausted, she tried to convince herself that maybe he was simply too worn out to process it properly. Over the next few days, however, his behavior didn't improve. In fact, it worsened. He spent even more time away, claiming work emergencies at all hours. One Friday afternoon, Amelia received a call from Jason's mother, Genevieve. They had always been on warm terms. Genevieve was a formidable woman, confident, sharp, and deeply invested in her son's life. She congratulated Amelia on the pregnancy in a formal, practiced tone. Then she mentioned something that made Amelia's stomach lurch. I just hope everything works out, dear. I know Jason's been very busy with that new marketing collaboration. I've heard he's been working closely with Vanessa Carter, perhaps too closely, if the rumors are to be believed. Hanging up the phone, Amelia felt a chill seep into her bones. Rumors. She wanted to ignore them, but the pieces were beginning to fit together. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden appearance of Vanessa Carter in nearly every conversation about work, it all pointed to an affair. A wave of nausea took hold of her, and she rushed to the bathroom, retching not just from pregnancy sickness, but from the mounting dread in her heart. That same evening, she mustered the courage to confront Jason directly. When he finally came home, hours after dinner had gone cold, she stood in front of him in the living room, blocking his path. I need you to be honest with me, she said, her voice unsteady yet resolute. Are you having an affair with Vanessa Carter? For a fleeting second, guilt flashed in his eyes. Then his face hardened into a mask of indignation. You're being ridiculous, he snapped. She's a professional contact. You know my father has big plans for the business expansion, and I have to work closely with marketing experts. Why would you even ask such a thing? Amelia refused to back down. She stood her ground. Because you're never home anymore. Because your phone is always hidden away. Because you smell like someone else's perfume. Because your own mother alluded to rumors. She took a shaky breath, tears glistening in her eyes. Jason, I'm pregnant with your child. If there's something going on, I deserve to know. Jason's jaw tightened, and he let out a sharp exhale. For a moment, Amelia thought he might come clean. Instead, he turned the tables. You think being pregnant gives you the right to interrogate me like this? You're stressed, and you're overreacting. I've told you it's work. The anger in his voice cut through her, and she saw not a trace of empathy or reassurance. He brushed past her and strode into the bedroom, leaving Amelia standing alone, tears rolling down her cheeks. Over the next few weeks, the chasm between them widened to a yawning gulf. Amelia silently wrestled with her suspicions, noticing every subtle detail, Jason's phone buzzing late at night, the hushed conversations he had when she left the room, and the repeated mention of marketing plans that required Vanessa's expert input. Amelia felt sick with worry for herself and the life growing inside her. She still held on to a slim hope that maybe she was mistaken, or that if Jason was straying, he might confess and try to fix things. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Amelia made a decision she never imagined she'd resort to. She followed him. He had left home in casual attire, saying he had to meet with a client. Amelia got into her own car a few minutes later, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She trailed him through Dallas traffic to an upscale condominium complex near the Arts District. Trying to stay inconspicuous, she parked a short distance away and watched as he entered the building. About 15 minutes later, she saw him step out onto a fifth-floor balcony alongside Vanessa. Their body language was impossible to misread. He wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her close. She laughed, leaning her head on his chest, her hand resting over his heart. The sight hammered the final nail into Amelia's hopes. She snapped a few photos with her phone, tears blurring her vision, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. She felt an odd mixture of heartbreak, rage, and relief. Heartbreak that her marriage was crumbling, rage that he would betray her while she carried his child, and relief that she now had irrefutable proof. No more second-guessing, no more illusions. The truth was laid bare. Jason was unfaithful, and Vanessa was the other woman. Amelia sped away, her mind reeling, sobs choking her throat, though she wanted answers. She couldn't confront him at that moment. Her heartbreak was too raw. Later, in the quiet emptiness of their home, she gazed at the photos on her phone, realizing that everything was about to change. Her life's foundation was collapsing, but she told herself she had to remain strong, if not for her own sake, then for the child growing inside her. The next confrontation she had with Jason would be definitive. There was no turning back from the revelations that would soon rock both their worlds. Days passed, filled with an uneasy calm in the house. Amelia waited for the right moment to confront Jason with the photographic evidence. She sensed he was on edge too, as if he sensed the tension brewing beneath her silence. Then, one evening, he informed her, without a shred of apology, that he needed her to accompany him to an important business function at a private estate on the outskirts of Dallas. The idea of walking into a room where Vanessa might be present made Amelia's stomach turn, but something in Jason's tone felt forcibly insistent, almost threatening. Gathering her courage, she agreed, knowing she had her own plan. She wanted the truth laid bare, and perhaps a confrontation in a public setting would prevent Jason from resorting to gaslighting or outright denial. The event was scheduled for the weekend, giving Amelia enough time to steel herself mentally. Yet she could never have predicted just how far Jason would go to humiliate her. The estate was a grand mansion owned by one of Jason's business associates. Amelia arrived on his arm, her heart pounding. She wore a flowing gown that accommodated her growing pregnancy bump. In the glittering lights of the chandeliered foyer, she spotted familiar faces from Dallas's high society, along with a cluster of younger executives she didn't recognize. And then there was Vanessa, radiant in a silver cocktail dress that clung to her every curve. She stood near the bar, sipping champagne, her eyes immediately locking onto Jason. Amelia's pulse quickened with anger. At first, the evening proceeded as any formal gathering might. Polite conversation, a lavish buffet, and soft, instrumental music playing in the background. But Amelia could sense something was off. The energy in the room felt charged with anticipation, as if everyone knew a secret she didn't. She noticed how a few guests gave her sympathetic glances, quickly looking away. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Then, at the stroke of 9, a hush fell over the crowd as Jason stepped to the center of the room with Vanessa at his side. Amelia stood at a distance, her chest tightening with each step he took. Clutching a microphone, Jason cleared his throat. "I'd like everyone's attention, please," he began. His eyes flickered toward Amelia for the briefest moment, but his expression was unreadable. "As many of you know," he continued, "I've been working on expanding my family's business into new markets. I've had the privilege of collaborating with one of the brightest marketing minds in the industry." He paused, gazing at Vanessa with a fondness that made Amelia's stomach lurch. Vanessa Carter has not only brought innovative strategies to the table, but she's also become someone I cherish on a personal level. A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd, but no one stepped forward to stop him. Amelia stood rooted in place, shock freezing her movements. Her heart hammered so fiercely she wondered if she might faint. Then, to her horror, Jason retrieved a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and knelt on one knee in front of Vanessa. "Vanessa," he said, his voice reverberating through the stunned silence, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Amelia couldn't breathe. Her chest constricted as though iron bands tightened around her ribs. She was witnessing her husband, the father of her unborn child, publicly proposing to another woman. Guests gasped, a flurry of shocked exclamations filling the air. Vanessa lifted a hand to her mouth in a theatrical display of surprise, feigning a moment of indecision before exclaiming, "Yes, Jason, of course I'll marry you." The crowd erupted into applause, though a significant portion of onlookers appeared uneasy. Amelia felt tears scorching her cheeks, but she was determined not to crumble. The baby in her womb kicked, as if sensing the turmoil raging through her. For a split second, Amelia thought she might collapse under the weight of devastation, but a fierce anger welled up, holding her upright. She forced her way through the crowd, which parted for her like a bow wave slicing the sea. Jason and Vanessa turned to face her, their expressions shifting from triumph to something akin to alarm. Before either could speak, Amelia raised her voice, her words slicing through the gathered throng. "Jason," she began, her tone trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak, "what do you think you're doing? I'm your wife, and I'm carrying your child. How dare you propose to another woman in front of me?" A hush fell once more. People exchanged glances, their faces reflecting horror, pity, and in some cases, morbid curiosity. Jason stood, his demeanor shifting to cold defensiveness. "We're over, Amelia," he said flatly. "You just refuse to accept it. Vanessa and I are moving forward with our life together. I needed to make it official. Everyone here deserves to know the truth." Vanessa slipped her arm around Jason's waist, her new engagement ring gleaming under the chandelier. Amelia could only stare, feeling as though the world had spun off its axis. "You coward," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You couldn't even tell me to my face. You had to drag me here to humiliate me." Jason shrugged, a hollow arrogance in his eyes. "I don't owe you anything anymore," he spat. "Sign the divorce papers when they're served. Stop clinging to something that's been dead for a long time." In that moment, Amelia realized the scale of his cruelty. He wanted to not just discard her, but to break her spirit in the process. Yet she found a spark of strength in the depths of her despair. Lifting her chin, she took a steadying breath. "I will never forget this," she murmured, her voice carrying a solemn promise. "You've shown your true colors to the entire world tonight. I hope you both get what you deserve." With that, Amelia turned on her heel and left the estate, tears streaming down her face. The crowd parted silently, some guests reaching out to touch her shoulder in a futile show of consolation. The doors slammed shut behind her, and her world felt irrevocably changed. As she climbed into a waiting taxi, her phone buzzing with calls and texts she ignored, Amelia knew she was at the lowest point of her life. She placed a protective hand over her belly. She might have lost a husband, but she still had a child to protect and perhaps, in the future, a reckoning to deliver. In the days following that disastrous night, Amelia's grief was all-consuming. She locked herself inside the master bedroom, the same space where she and Jason had once whispered dreams about the future. Now, it felt haunted by a spectre of broken promises. She curled up on the bed, the duvet pulled to her chin, replaying Jason's proposal to Vanessa in her mind, like a sickening loop she couldn't escape. Her phone continued to buzz with calls from concerned friends, acquaintances, and even nosy busybodies from Jason's social circle. With each notification, Amelia felt like she was being dragged back into that humiliating moment in the mansion. She ignored most of the calls, though she eventually mustered the courage to speak with her younger sister, Sandra. Soft-spoken but fiercely protective, Sandra offered unwavering support. "We'll get through this, Amelia," she promised. "You're strong. You have the baby to think about. Don't let that scumbag's actions define your future." Despite the encouraging words, Amelia found the simplest tasks daunting. She had trouble eating, her appetite stifled by the heartbreak lodged in her throat. Sleep offered little respite, as nightmares of Jason and Vanessa's public display jolted her awake each night. Worst of all, her emotions were magnified by pregnancy hormones, creating a swirling storm of sadness, anger, betrayal, and fear for the future. Amid the swirl of despair, official paperwork arrived, divorce documents delivered in a crisp envelope with Jason's attorney's letterhead. The finality of it made Amelia's hand shake as she opened the package. Jason was moving swiftly. He wanted to dissolve their marriage, dividing assets with the cold precision of a business deal. Enclosed was an offer for a monthly stipend until such time as their child reached adulthood, a calculated sum that reeked of hush money. The subtext was clear: take the settlement and disappear from his life quietly. Amelia bristled at the notion of letting him buy her silence. Yet practical concerns weighed heavily on her mind. She needed financial stability, especially now that she was carrying a child. Her job, a humble administrative position in a local nonprofit, provided steady but modest income. The cost of raising a child alone in Dallas was daunting. For a few agonizing days she wavered, tempted to sign just to ensure her baby's future was secure. But each time she lifted a pen to the dotted line, she thought about that humiliating moment when Jason proposed to Vanessa right in front of her. She remembered the baby's protective flutter in her womb, as if her unborn child was urging her to stand strong. Amelia set the paperwork aside, deciding she would consult a lawyer first. During that turbulent period, she received a surprising invitation from none other than Genevieve, Jason's mother. Though Amelia initially hesitated, surely Genevieve would take her son's side, she agreed to meet. Sensing a glimmer of compassion in the older woman's voice, they arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in downtown Dallas. Upon arriving, Genevieve looked strained and older than Amelia remembered, her expensive jewelry doing little to hide the distress etched across her face. "Amelia," Genevieve said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand, "I'm so sorry for what Jason has done. I never raised him to behave this way." Tears glistened in her eyes, and Amelia felt her own well up in response. "I want you to know you'll always be family to me, and I'm here if you need anything." Despite her pain, Amelia was touched by the gesture. She didn't know how genuine it was, perhaps. Genevieve was attempting damage control. Still, she felt a flicker of relief that at least someone acknowledged the cruelty she had endured. "Thank you," Amelia whispered. "I appreciate your kindness. Even though I'm not sure where we stand now, I don't want to cause problems." Genevieve nodded solemnly. "I understand, but please keep me informed about the baby. I want to be part of my grandchild's life, no matter what. And if you need a good attorney, I can recommend one who isn't tied to the family, someone who will protect your interests." The meeting ended with a hug, and Genevieve slipping Amelia a business card with the name of a reputable divorce lawyer. Amelia walked away with mixed feelings. On one hand, she felt some solace in Genevieve's support. On the other, she couldn't shake the question, why hadn't Genevieve intervened sooner? Returning to her empty home, Amelia took a long look in the mirror. Her reflection showed tear-stained cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, and the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. In that moment, she made a decision: she would not allow the humiliation to define her or her unborn child's life. Though the path ahead looked arduous, she clung to the determination to emerge from this ordeal stronger. She picked up her phone, scrolling past the gossip-laden voicemails until she found the business card's number. With a steady breath, she dialed the lawyer, mentally preparing for a new battle. For her and her child, she would fight. Perhaps, in time, she might even find a way to transform this devastation into a source of resilience. Amelia's first meeting with attorney Rebecca Norris marked a pivotal moment in her fight for independence. Rebecca was a sharp-tongued woman with salt and pepper hair, dressed in a no-nonsense black blazer. Her eyes conveyed both intelligence and empathy, and Amelia felt a sense of relief settling in as they discussed the complexities of the divorce case. What Jason did is not just emotionally devastating, it's legally reprehensible, Rebecca stated calmly as she paged through the documents Amelia had brought. Publicly proposing to someone else while still married? Even if Texas laws for fault divorce aren't as punitive as in some states, it still paints a compelling picture of his wrongdoing. And that can work to our advantage. A tiny spark of hope ignited in Amelia. She had dreaded an uphill legal battle, imagining Jason's high-priced lawyers steamrolling her. But Rebecca's confidence gave her courage. Over the course of an hour, they mapped out a strategy that included fighting for fair child support, custody arrangements, and possibly even compensation for the emotional distress. Rebecca made it clear that Amelia's reluctance to sign Jason's hush money settlement was a wise decision. Accepting it without negotiation might have locked her into a less favorable position. Beyond the legal realm, Amelia began to focus on her emotional and financial stability. She realized that the job at the non-profit, while rewarding, might not be enough to sustain her and her child in the long run. Swallowing her pride, she updated her resume and began applying for positions at larger organizations, hoping to find a role that offered better benefits and a more substantial salary. The process wasn't quick or easy. She sent out dozens of applications, attended interviews that sometimes went nowhere, and juggled bouts of morning sickness in between. During this phase, she sought refuge in her sister Sandra's support. Sandra often came over to cook healthy meals, ensuring Amelia was getting the right nutrition for the pregnancy. She also accompanied Amelia to doctor's appointments at Mount Sinai Hospital, where Amelia felt reassured each time she heard her baby's heartbeat on the ultrasound. She discovered small moments of joy, like finding out she was expecting a little girl. That milestone brought tears to her eyes, reminding her that in the midst of darkness, there was a precious ray of light. As her belly grew, so did her resolve. She confided in a close friend, Rachel, who worked at a startup tech company in Dallas. Through this connection, Amelia landed an interview for an administrative manager position. The job was a significant step up from her previous role, offering a flexible schedule and robust maternity benefits. The interviewer was frank about the challenges of the role, tight deadlines, multitasking between different departments, but Amelia embraced the possibility of forging a new path. She left the interview feeling cautiously optimistic. Within a week, the company extended a formal job offer. Amelia accepted, heart pounding with excitement and relief. Although anxiety still loomed moving to a new job, while pregnant was a brave leap, she sensed that forging ahead was her only option. On her first day, she discovered a supportive work culture. Her boss, a mother of two, expressed understanding for her situation and even provided her with resources on balancing pregnancy with a demanding workload. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Rebecca filed papers citing Jason's extramarital affair as grounds. Jason's attorneys responded with the expected bluster and denial, trying to shift blame onto Amelia for failing to maintain the marital relationship. They argued that she was emotionally distant and uncompromising, attempting to paint Jason as a victim of a loveless marriage. In these legal skirmishes, Amelia felt her anger well up, but each time she reviewed a misleading statement from Jason's side, she channeled that fury into motivation to fight harder, to not back down. Every day seemed like a balancing act, juggling the new job, attending prenatal checkups, and steeling herself for the unrelenting divorce battle. But, despite the challenges, Amelia felt an ember of strength glowing in her heart. With each passing week, she noticed a subtle shift in her mindset. She wasn't just surviving, she was laying the groundwork for a comeback. In the background, word of Jason's public betrayal and abrupt engagement to Vanessa traveled swiftly through Dallas's social circles. Some of Jason's old friends quietly reached out to Amelia, expressing sympathy. Others distanced themselves from the drama, wanting to remain neutral. Amelia learned to filter her social media accounts, blocking negativity and focusing on constructive support. Through it all, she resisted the urge to lash out publicly, trusting that her best response would be living well and securing a stable future for her child. One late evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Amelia sank into her couch, phone in hand, scrolling through job emails and messages from acquaintances. She then stumbled upon an ad for a prenatal yoga class. Impulsively, she signed up, thinking it might help her cope with the stress. The first session felt awkward. She was surrounded by glowing pregnant women who seemed relaxed and at peace. Yet, as she practiced gentle poses, focusing on her breath and the life growing inside her, a calm she hadn't felt in months washed over her. Amelia left that yoga studio, feeling not just physically looser, but mentally unburdened. She had discovered a healthy outlet for her anxiety, a sanctuary where she could reconnect with her body and emotions. That evening, she journaled about her aspirations for herself and her unborn daughter. She wrote about building a life filled with dignity, love, and resilience, one free from the shadows Jason had cast. Step by step, Amelia was forging a path forward. Although the sting of betrayal still ached and the humiliating memories still haunted her dreams, she refused to be defined by the hurt. She chose to be defined by her determination, her expanding skill set, her growing circle of supportive friends, and the immense love she already felt for the child she carried. Little did she know that fate had more twists in store, twists that would ultimately lead her to an unexpected triumph, where karma would spin the wheel of justice in her favor. Jason and Vanessa wasted no time flaunting their romance. Pictures of lavish dinners, weekend getaways, and her sparkling engagement ring appeared on social media weekly. Publicly, they acted like a power couple destined for success. Privately, however, a far different story was unfolding. Marcus, Jason's father, couldn't ignore the scandal that erupted when Jason proposed to Vanessa in front of Amelia. Though furious, he kept most criticism behind closed doors, hoping to protect the family's reputation. Vanessa aimed to capitalize on her new status, pushing for bold marketing moves at the family's car dealerships. She proposed glitzy ad campaigns and even hinted at opening a luxury showroom. Marcus, ever pragmatic, listened politely but remained skeptical of her extravagant ideas. Vanessa's drive for instant prestige collided with the realities of the business. She wanted massive budgets, but Marcus was wary of hemorrhaging funds. Despite this, Jason tried to appease her. He granted as many requests as he could, hoping to prove that leaving Amelia was no mistake. At first, Vanessa seemed pleased. She boasted about rebranding the company, confident her touch would transform it into an industry leader. However, the more she demanded, the more tension arose between Jason and his father. Marcus saw rising costs with few tangible returns. At board meetings, he questioned Vanessa's plans, warning Jason that reckless spending could damage both their bottom line and investor confidence. Feeling torn, Jason defended Vanessa in public while privately pleading with her to scale back. At home, their facade began to crack. Vanessa criticized Jason whenever his work kept him away from her side. She accused him of valuing the business over her happiness, demanding more lavish gifts and constant reassurance. Heated arguments replaced the honeymoon phase. Jason, unaccustomed to such relentless conflict, grew increasingly stressed. Without Amelia's calming influence, he struggled to maintain any semblance of peace. Meanwhile, rumors circulated through Dallas's high society circles, suggesting that Vanessa might be using Jason as a stepping stone for her own ambitions. Some speculated that her vision for the dealership's future was a cover for greed. Others whispered that Jason had rushed blindly into the relationship out of pride. Still, neither Jason nor Vanessa would admit fault. Determined to validate their public image, they dove headlong into planning an extravagant wedding. Costs soared as Vanessa insisted on designer attire, elaborate floral arrangements, and celebrity entertainment. Behind their glamorous Instagram posts, quarrels escalated. Marcus demanded financial transparency, while investors grew concerned about frivolous expenditures. Under pressure from all sides, Jason felt increasingly trapped. The lifestyle he thought he wanted had morphed into a constant scramble for damage control. Unbeknownst to them, these cracks in their perfect image were only the beginning. In chasing validation and ignoring the underlying strife, they set the stage for a downfall even more public than their engagement spectacle. By the time Amelia neared her due date, a storm of problems had begun to converge on Jason and Vanessa's meticulously crafted kingdom. It started with an internal audit of the family dealerships, initiated by Marcus, who suspected irregularities in the new marketing budgets. Sure enough, the auditors discovered overspending well beyond the company's typical allocations. Inflated invoices, unexplained purchases, and questionable vendor contracts pointed straight to Vanessa's newly established marketing department. In some cases, funds had been diverted to personal expenses, luxury travel, high-end fashion shows, and lavish dinners that had little to do with actual business campaigns. When confronted, Vanessa played innocent. She blamed miscommunication and clerical errors for the discrepancies. But the mounting evidence suggested deliberate misuse of company funds. Marcus was furious. "My son may be blind, but I'm not," he snarled in a tense meeting with Jason and Vanessa. "This is my family's legacy, and I won't let it be destroyed by selfish whims." Jason, torn between defending his fiancée and saving face with his father, tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding. But Marcus wasn't swayed. Legal counsel advised that Vanessa's conduct put the company in a precarious position. The business risked losing credibility with investors if word got out that the future head of the dealership chain was involved in such financial fiascos. Then came the break-in scandal. Late one night, a brand new luxury car disappeared from one of the dealership showrooms. Security footage revealed a suspicious figure tampering with the locks. Initially, Jason assumed it was a random theft, until the footage showed the thief handing the stolen vehicle off to an unidentified accomplice who took it straight to a private lot where Vanessa's name was on a lease contract. The news rattled everyone. Though the details were murky, speculation soared about whether Vanessa had orchestrated the theft for personal gain or as part of some convoluted scheme. Police launched an investigation, and while Vanessa wasn't officially charged, the fiasco added another layer of reputational damage. Investors grew skittish. Meanwhile, the lavish wedding plans dissolved into chaos. Vendors began demanding deposits and final payments. The event planner threatened to cancel if she didn't receive overdue fees. In a frantic scramble, Jason emptied personal accounts and even tried to dip into the business reserves. When Marcus discovered this, he locked down company funds. Furious arguments between father and son followed, culminating in Marcus threatening to cut Jason out of the business altogether if he couldn't rein in his fiancée. For Vanessa, the cracks in Jason's facade of endless wealth had finally become visible. She lashed out at him, accusing him of misrepresenting his financial stability. "You made me believe I'd have everything," she screamed during a heated argument overheard by staff at the dealership's main office. "How dare you embarrass me like this? I'm supposed to be your future wife, not some penny-pinching girlfriend." Jason, who had never been adept at managing conflict without Amelia's calming influence, lost his temper as well. He spewed his own accusations, blaming Vanessa for greed and for making impractical business decisions that threatened the entire family empire. Their fights became routine, the once luxurious condo filled with shouting matches and slammed doors. In a matter of months, their dream life had devolved into a nightmarish power struggle. Then, in a final twist of poetic justice, Vanessa herself was caught in a compromising situation, an incriminating set of text messages with a man rumored to be a venture capitalist. She'd been courting for new marketing contracts. Jason discovered them accidentally when he picked up her phone to read a text from a vendor. What he found instead were flirtatious exchanges, references to secret meetings, and insinuations that she was open to leaving Jason if the right opportunities presented themselves. Jason's world crashed. Rage and betrayal flooded him. He confronted Vanessa, waving the phone in her face. "All this time, I trusted you," he roared. "I defied my entire family, cast aside my own wife, and for what? So you could be setting up your next conquest." Vanessa scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be naive, Jason. I wouldn't have to look elsewhere if you'd kept your promises. I'm not going to be tied down to a sinking ship." A violent argument ensued, culminating in Vanessa storming out of the condo with her belongings. The wedding was off. Furious, Jason demanded she repay every cent she'd siphoned from the dealership's budgets, but Vanessa laughed in his face, threatening to take him down with her if he went public with accusations of embezzlement. She hinted she had dirt on Jason's dealings, implying he wasn't squeaky clean either. The standoff left him shaken, uncertain how to proceed without further scandal. Broken, humiliated, and out hundreds of thousands of dollars, Jason found himself alone in the echoing condo that now felt more like a tomb of shattered illusions. His father's threats to disown him loomed. The business empire he once believed he would inherit without question was on precarious footing, all because he had allowed his arrogance and lust to dictate his life choices. In the emptiness of that condo, he finally understood the depth of his betrayal toward Amelia. He recalled the night he proposed to Vanessa in front of her, the look of devastation on Amelia's face, and the unborn child he had dismissed so callously. Jason realized with sickening clarity that he had lost everything: his reputation, his father's trust, and the only woman who had ever genuinely cared for him. The house of cards he built with Vanessa had collapsed, and he was left standing amid the wreckage, awaiting the final toll of karma's bell. As fate would have it, the final stroke of karma arrived at the same time Amelia welcomed new life. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Aurora, a name she chose for its meaning dawn, symbolizing new beginnings and hope after a long, dark night. The labor was intense, spanning almost 18 hours, but Amelia endured each contraction with a fierce resolve. By her side, Sandra offered unwavering support, holding her hand and wiping her forehead. When Aurora finally let out her first cry, Amelia burst into tears of gratitude and overwhelming love. In the days following Aurora's birth, Amelia felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she had not known in a long time. She brought her daughter home to a modest but comfortable apartment she had recently rented closer to her new workplace. The space wasn't fancy by any stretch, but it was theirs, and it felt safe. A few colleagues from her tech startup job visited with gifts, diapers, baby clothes, and even a crowd-sourced hamper of essentials. For the first time since her marriage fell apart, Amelia saw a future brimming with possibilities. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings reached their final stage. Thanks to Rebecca's meticulous legal strategy, combined with Jason's very public affair and the disastrous aftermath, Amelia had the upper hand. Jason's attorneys tried one last round of intimidation tactics, questioning Amelia's fitness as a parent, implying she was financially unstable, but Rebecca dismantled each argument with evidence of Amelia's stable employment and healthy living environment. Additionally, the courts took into account the emotional distress and the humiliating circumstances that led to the separation. By the time the final judgment was issued, Amelia was granted full primary custody, with Jason mandated to provide substantial child support. Word reached Amelia by way of mutual acquaintances that Jason's finances were in dire straits. Marcus had frozen his access to certain family funds, forcing Jason to rely on a modest salary and whatever personal savings he had left. He had moved out of the opulent condo and was living in a smaller apartment near the dealership. Vanessa was long gone, and rumors suggested she had left Dallas entirely, possibly to avoid any legal fallout from the embezzlement allegations. Some whispered that the venture capitalist she'd been flirting with had cut ties as well, leaving her nowhere to land softly. One afternoon, a few weeks after finalizing the divorce, Amelia was cradling Aurora when she heard a timid knock at her door. Peeking through the peephole, she was stunned to see Jason standing there, disheveled, shoulders slumped. Even though her pulse spiked in anger and wariness, she opened the door a few inches, keeping the chain latch in place. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Jason exhaled, looking frail, as if the weight of the world hung on his shoulders. "I came to see my daughter," he said quietly. "And to talk to you." Amelia hesitated. Legally, he had visitation rights, though they were structured through a formal schedule. She considered closing the door in his face, but a part of her remembered that Aurora, someday, might want to know her father. And so, after a moment of deliberation, Amelia unlatched the door and allowed him inside. The man who stepped into her living room bore little resemblance to the arrogant husband who had humiliated her. His once confident air was replaced by a hollow sadness. He looked around at the neatly organized space, the baby toys, and the warm sunlight streaming through the curtains. When he turned his gaze to Aurora, asleep in Amelia's arms, tears glistened in his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, taking a seat when Amelia gestured for him to do so. He waited, as if unsure whether Amelia would allow him to hold the baby. After a few tense seconds, Amelia carefully handed Aurora over, her maternal instincts on high alert. Jason cradled his daughter gingerly, tears slipping down his cheeks as he stared at her tiny features. "I'm sorry," he finally choked out, looking up at Amelia, "for everything, for how I treated you, for humiliating you, for not being there during the pregnancy." Amelia stood at a slight distance, arms folded. Part of her had dreamed of this moment, of Jason coming to his senses and apologizing. But actually hearing the words felt surreal. "I can't change what happened," she said, softly but without wavering. "And neither can you. Aurora is my priority now." Jason nodded, his expression a mixture of regret and acceptance. He asked if there was any chance they could work things out, maybe start over. Amelia felt a surge of heartbreak and anger. "We are far beyond that point," she replied, her voice steady. "The divorce is finalized. You have responsibilities now as a father, and I hope you'll honor them. But as for us, there's no going back." He didn't argue. Perhaps he was too broken to fight. He simply held Aurora a moment longer, then gently handed her back. Before leaving, Jason asked if he could visit again, following the proper schedule. Amelia nodded, giving him a short but polite goodbye. After he left, she stood by the window, holding Aurora close. She peered down to see Jason trudging away, shoulders hunched, the vibrant swagger gone. The contrast between their two paths couldn't have been more stark. Amelia felt sorrow for the father of her child, but also a triumph that she had rebuilt her life without him and would continue to do so. In a sense, she had already won the battle he had so viciously provoked. She had found new strength, new love in her daughter, and new confidence in herself. And that was how Amelia got the last laugh, not by stooping to Jason's level of cruelty, but by living a life that radiated genuine hope and possibility. The revenge, if it could be called that, lay in her peace of mind and in the future she was carving out. She was thriving, raising Aurora in a home filled with warmth and authenticity, while Jason faced the wreckage of the empire he had almost inherited, isolated from the illusions that once fueled his arrogance. Indeed, karma had played its hand, and Amelia had emerged with the greatest gift of all, a beautiful baby girl and a life that was truly her own. Sometimes the universe writes the best plot twists of all. Jason and Vanessa tried to feed their egos while stomping on someone else's life, only to end up trapped by their own lies and destructive choices. Amelia, on the other hand, faced her heartbreak with courage, rebuilt her life step by step, and discovered real happiness in motherhood and newfound independence. By the time Jason realized what he'd lost, the door to reconciliation was sealed shut. Stories like Amelia's remind us that true victory isn't always about triumphing over an enemy. It's about finding the strength to heal and pursue a better future. If this powerful journey moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button, share the story with others, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more real and inspiring tales of resilience and redemption to light. Thank you for watching.
The sound of a gavel is supposed to signal finality and end to the chaos. For Ava Collins, it was the sound of her world shattering into a million irreparable pieces. Standing in the cold, sterile courtroom, she watched the man she had loved for a decade, the man whose dreams she had funded with her own inheritance, walk away with everything. Her home, their savings, the company she helped build, all of it gone. He didn't even look back. Just a flicker of a triumphant smirk was all she got. Left with a beat-up car, a box of clothes, and a heart hollowed out by betrayal, she had never felt more alone or invisible. But what Ava didn't know, and what her ex-husband couldn't possibly imagine, was that in just a few days a letter would arrive that would change everything. A letter that would connect her to an unimaginable legacy and prove that sometimes rock bottom is the perfect foundation on which to build an empire. The courtroom air was thick with a silence that felt heavier than sound. Ava Collins stood beside her court-appointed lawyer, a young man whose face was a mask of weary resignation. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white, the only anchor in a dizzying sea of loss. Across the room, her soon-to-be ex-husband Daniel sat perfectly composed in a Tom Ford suit that she had bought him for their 8th anniversary. His lawyer, a shark in pinstripes named Mitchell Vance, shuffled his papers with an air of practiced victory. After careful review of the financial disclosures and marital assets, Judge Miller began, his voice devoid of emotion. This court finds that the prenuptial agreement signed by Ms. Collins on June 4, 2015 is valid and enforceable. Ava felt the air leave her lungs. The prenup. The document Daniel had slid in front of her a week before their wedding, calling it a mere formality, a just-in-case for his tech startup Innovate Dynamics. At the time, the company was just an idea sketched on napkins in their tiny apartment funded by the $20,000 left to Ava by her late grandmother. "It's to protect us, honey," he had whispered, his voice smooth as silk. "To keep business separate so we can focus on our life together." She had trusted him. She had signed it without a second thought. Furthermore, the judge continued, his eyes scanning the document. The court recognizes Innovate Dynamics, its assets, and all subsequent profits as the sole property of Mr. Daniel Fletcher as stipulated. A quiet gasp escaped Ava's lips. Sole property. She remembered the all-nighters she'd pulled designing the company's logo, building its first website, managing the books while Daniel focused on coding. She remembered skipping vacations, selling her own car, and pouring every spare dollar into his dream. Their dream. Mitchell Vance stood. Your Honor, we also have the matter of the marital home. Yes. The judge nodded. The down payment for the property was sourced from an initial seed funding round for Innovate Dynamics. As such, the home is considered a corporate asset. Full ownership is awarded to Mr. Fletcher. Ava's legs felt weak. The house in the suburbs, the one with the garden she'd spent years cultivating, the one where they had planned to raise a family. It wasn't just brick and mortar. It was the repository of a decade of her life, and he was taking it. The final humiliations came swiftly. Their joint savings account, which Daniel had systematically drained into a corporate account a month before filing for divorce, was deemed part of the business. The stocks she thought they owned together were all in his name. The judge awarded her no alimony, citing the prenup's ironclad clauses. She was to be given her personal belongings, the 2012 Honda Civic she'd owned before they even met, and nothing else. To add insult to injury, the judge ruled that she was responsible for half of the couple's shared credit card debt, a sum that had ballooned thanks to Daniel's lavish spending in the final months of their marriage. The gavel fell. The sound echoed in the cavernous room, a sharp, cruel finality. It was over. Daniel stood smoothing the front of his jacket. He turned, and for a moment his eyes met Ava's across the room. There was no remorse, no sadness, just the cool, calculating glint of a victor. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to his lawyer and walked out without a word to her. Ava remained frozen, the lawyer's hand on her arm, a distant pressure. The world had dissolved into a low hum. She had walked into this courthouse as a wife, a partner, a co-builder of a life. She was walking out as a debtor, a fool with nothing to her name but the clothes on her back. Outside, the city air was crisp and unforgiving. She found Daniel leaning against his new Porsche 911, a gleaming black beast that had replaced the modest sedan they once shared. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "How could you?" He finally looked at her, his expression one of mild irritation, as if she were a piece of lint on his expensive suit. "It's just business, Ava. You were never cut out for this level of success. You're too sentimental. I believed in you." She choked out a tear, finally escaping and tracing a cold path down her cheek. "I gave you everything. And I gave you a very exciting life for a few years," he said with a condescending smile. "You should be grateful. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting." He slid into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life. "I'll have my assistant arrange a time for you to get your things. You have 24 hours. He sped away, leaving Ava standing on the pavement, enveloped in the smell of his exhaust. The crushing weight of his betrayal of the court's cold decree settled upon her. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the courthouse doors, a woman she barely recognized, stripped of her past and with no foreseeable future. The only way to go was down. Rock bottom wasn't a dramatic crashing fall. It was a slow, quiet sinking. It was the feeling of the cold leather of her friend Maya's sofa against her cheek at 3 a.m., the muffled sounds of New York City traffic, a constant, lonely reminder that the world was moving on without her. Maya had been a saint. She'd opened her tiny one-bedroom apartment without hesitation, setting Ava up on the pull-out couch and filling the fridge with comfort food that Ava had no appetite for. "You stay as long as you need," Maya had insisted, her voice fierce with loyalty. "We'll figure this out. He won't win, not in the long run." But it felt like he had already won. The 24 hours Daniel had given her to collect her life had been a blur of humiliation. His assistant, a coolly efficient woman half Ava's age, had followed her from room to room with a clipboard, making sure she only took items from an approved list. Her clothes, her books, a few sentimental trinkets. Every piece of furniture, every piece of art they had picked out together, even the worn-out armchair she loved to read in, was now his. The garden she had poured her soul into was the hardest to leave. Her roses were just beginning to bloom. Now days melted into a gray fog. Ava spent hours scrolling through job sites on Maya's laptop. The graphic design portfolio she had once been proud of felt dated. She hadn't worked a full-time job in years, having dedicated herself to Innovate Dynamics. Her resume had a gaping 10-year hole filled with words like partner and co-founder titles that the court had legally invalidated. In interviews for junior designer positions, she was met with thinly veiled suspicion. So you were a co-founder of a successful tech firm, and now you want an entry-level position with us? One interviewer had asked, his eyebrow raised in disbelief. Rejection followed rejection. She was either overqualified or underexperienced, a paradox that left her feeling utterly useless. The credit card debt loomed over her, the statements arriving with menacing red letters. She started selling what little she had left of value, a pair of earrings from her mother, a designer bag Daniel had bought her in a moment of feigned generosity. Each sale felt like chipping away another piece of herself. One afternoon, desperate for a sliver of purpose, she logged onto a freelance website. She saw a posting from a small local bakery that needed a new logo for a pittance. The pay was barely enough for a week's worth of groceries, but it was something. She spent 2 days pouring herself into the design, creating a warm, inviting logo of a whisk intertwined with a sprig of wheat. It was the first time in months she had felt a flicker of her old self, the creative, hopeful woman she had been before Daniel. She sent the design to the bakery owner, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Gable. An hour later, her phone buzzed with an email. "Dear Ava," it read, "it's absolutely perfect. It's more than I could have ever hoped for. You have a true gift. Thank you." Reading those words, Ava felt a strange pressure build behind her eyes. It wasn't the soul-crushing sadness she had grown accustomed to. It was something else, a pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness. It wasn't about the money. It was about being seen, about creating something good and having it be appreciated. That evening, Daniel's face was plastered across the cover of Tech Magnate Monthly. The headline read, "Daniel Fletcher, the self-made visionary behind Innovate Dynamics' meteoric rise." The article painted him as a lone genius, a brilliant mind who had built an empire from scratch. There was no mention of a wife, no acknowledgement of a partner who had been there from the beginning. It was a complete erasure of her existence. Maya saw the magazine in a bodega and threw it in the trash before Ava could see it, but the damage was done. Ava saw the headline on a newsstand. The small spark of hope from Mrs. Gable's email was almost extinguished by the sheer scale of Daniel's fabricated narrative. He wasn't just taking their assets. He was rewriting their history, stealing her past, and claiming it as his own. That night, as she lay on the lumpy sofa, the weight of it all pressed down. She thought about giving up, about letting the despair finally swallow her whole. But then she thought of Mrs. Gable's kindness, of the simple joy in creating that logo. It was a tiny rebellion, a refusal to be completely erased. He could take the house, the money, the company. He could plaster his lies on every magazine cover in the country. But he couldn't take that small, resilient spark inside her. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to fan it back into a flame. She had to. It was all she had left. Life began to settle into a grim, monotonous rhythm. Ava woke up on Maya's couch, spent her days hunting for freelance gigs that paid next to nothing, and her nights trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety of her mounting debt. She became an expert at smiling through Maya's worried glances and insisting she was fine, a word that had lost all meaning. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. About 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, a certified mail notice was stuck to the front door of Maya's apartment building. It was addressed to Ava Collins. Probably another debt collector, Ava said, her stomach twisting. They're getting creative. It looks official, Maya said, handing her the slip. It's from a law firm, Covington and Sterling. Sounds expensive. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. Covington and Sterling. The name sounded like old money in mahogany-paneled boardrooms. It had to be a mistake. Or worse, maybe Daniel had found some new way to torment her, some legal loophole to sue her for something she didn't even have. I'm not going, Ava said, tossing the slip onto the small coffee table. I can't afford a lawyer, especially not one from a place with a name like that. It's a trap. Or it's not, Maya countered, picking up the slip. What if it's important? You can't just ignore it, Ava. Go to the post office, get the letter. At least then you'll know what you're dealing with. After a day of Maya's relentless but gentle prodding, Ava relented. She walked the 10 blocks to the post office, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She handed the slip to the clerk, who returned with a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was on Wall Street. On the back was a wax seal, a deep crimson stamped with an ornate K. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The paper was heavy, a quality she hadn't felt in years. The letter was brief and formal. Dear Ms. Collins, this letter serves as a formal request for your presence at the offices of Covington and Sterling. We are handling the estate of our late client, Mr. Arthur Kensington, and your attendance is urgently required for the reading of his last will and testament. A meeting has been scheduled for you on Friday, October 17th at 10:00 a.m. Sincerely, Walter Peterson, Senior Partner, Covington and Sterling. Arthur Kensington. The name meant nothing to her. She searched her memory, trying to place it. A distant relative. An old family friend. Nothing. Her family was small, her parents having been only children themselves. Her grandparents were all gone. She was sure she had never heard the name Kensington in her life. It has to be a mistake, she told Maya that evening, showing her the letter. They've got the wrong Ava Collins. Is your social security number on it? Maya asked, ever the pragmatist. Ava checked the bottom of the page. It was there, printed in small, precise numbers. Her number. Okay, so it's not a mistake? Maya said, her eyes wide. Who is Arthur Kensington? A quick search on Maya's laptop provided the answer, and it was one that made the room spin. Arthur Kensington wasn't just a man, he was a legend. A reclusive billionaire, the titan behind Kensington Industries, a sprawling global conglomerate with interests in technology, shipping, and real estate. He was a mythical figure in the financial world, rarely photographed, known for his eccentricities and his staggering wealth, estimated by Forbes to be in the tens of billions. The screen was filled with obituaries. Arthur Kensington had passed away a week ago at the age of 92. This is insane, Ava whispered, scrolling through photos of Kensington Tower, a gleaming skyscraper that dominated the Manhattan skyline. What could a man like that possibly have to do with me? I have no idea, Maya breathed. But you have to go. Ava, you have to go to that meeting. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but now it was mingled with a dizzying, terrifying curiosity. For weeks her world had been small and gray, confined to this apartment and the crushing reality of her failure. This letter, with its crimson seal and impossible request, felt like a door opening into a different universe. She had no idea what lay on the other side. It could be another dead end, another cruel joke. But it was the first thing that hadn't been a bill or a rejection notice in a very long time. It was a mystery, and it was hers. Dressed in her only presentable outfit, a simple black dress and a blazer she'd bought for a job interview she didn't get, Ava stood before the imposing brass doors of Covington and Sterling. The Wall Street address felt a world away from Maya's cramped apartment. Men and women in impeccably tailored suits rushed past, their faces set with purpose. Ava felt like a ghost and imposter in a world she was never meant to enter. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the heavy door open. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth, all marble floors, dark wood, and hushed reverence. A receptionist directed her to the 40th floor. The elevator ride was silent and swift, her reflection in the polished brass walls looking pale and anxious. The 40th floor was even quieter. A woman with a warm smile greeted her. "Ms. Collins, Mr. Peterson is expecting you." She was led down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men, presumably former partners. The door at the end of the hall opened into a vast corner office with a panoramic view of the New York harbor and the Statue of Liberty. An older man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed white beard rose from behind a massive mahogany desk. "Ms. Collins, thank you for coming. I'm Walter Peterson." He gestured to a leather armchair opposite his desk. "Please have a seat." Ava sat, her hands clutching her purse in her lap. "Mr. Peterson, I think there's been a mistake. I received your letter, but I don't know anyone named Arthur Kensington." Mr. Peterson gave her a gentle, knowing smile. He folded his hands on the desk. "No, Ms. Collins, there is no mistake. Arthur knew who you were. He followed your life from a distance for many years." Ava's brow furrowed in confusion. "Followed my life? Why, I don't understand." "It's a bit of a story," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Your maternal grandfather was named Robert Miller, correct?" "Yes," Ava confirmed. "Robert had a younger brother. When they were young men, they had a severe falling out over the family business, a small manufacturing plant. The argument was bitter and the family was torn apart. Robert stayed and eventually ran the business into the ground. His younger brother was disowned, cast out with nothing. That younger brother changed his name, moved to the city, and vowed to build something of his own. The name he chose was Arthur Kensington." The air in the room seemed to thin. Ava stared at him, trying to process the information. An estranged great-uncle. A family secret so deep it had been buried completely. "My grandfather never mentioned a brother," she said, her voice faint. "I don't doubt it. The pride and the pain ran deep on both sides," Mr. Peterson explained. "But Arthur never completely let go. He kept tabs on his brother's family discreetly through investigators. He knew when your mother was born, when she married, and when you were born. He watched you grow up, saw you get married, and he saw you get divorced." A chill went down Ava's spine. This mysterious, powerful man had been a silent observer of her entire life. "Arthur was a very private man, but he believed in blood," Peterson continued. "He had no children of his own. In his final years, he grew to admire your resilience, what he called your Miller grit. He was disappointed by how your marriage ended. He felt a great injustice had been done." Mr. Peterson slid a thick leather-bound document across the desk. "Ms. Collins, this is the last will and testament of Arthur Kensington. He signed it 2 weeks ago, the day after your divorce was finalized." He paused, his gaze steady and serious. "He named you as his sole beneficiary. He left you everything." Ava just stared at the document. The words sole beneficiary and everything echoed in the silent room, but refused to form a coherent thought. "Everything," she repeated the word, sounding foreign. "What? What is everything?" "Everything." Mr. Peterson reiterated, his voice gentle but firm. "His entire estate, his properties, his art collection, his personal accounts, and his controlling interest in Kensington Industries." He let the name hang in the air. Kensington Industries. The global conglomerate. The skyscraper. The tens of billions of dollars. Ava felt a wave of vertigo. Her mind flashed back to just yesterday, to the despair of counting loose change to see if she could afford a subway ride. She thought of the cold courtroom, of Daniel's sneer, of the suffocating feeling of being worth nothing. It couldn't be real. This was a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and malnutrition. "This is impossible," she stammered, shaking her head. "This is a joke." I assure you, Ms. Collins, Arthur Kensington did not have a sense of humor about his legacy, Mr. Peterson said calmly. You are now, for all intents and purposes, one of the wealthiest women in the world, Gideon. He opened the folio, revealing page after page of legal text. But Ava wasn't seeing the words. She was seeing a new reality. Split open before her was a reality so vast and unimaginable that it threatened to engulf her. Wealth, power, and empire she knew nothing about. All of this fell onto her shoulders. The woman who just a few days ago had no future now inherited a future she could not even imagine. The news broke like a tsunami. Reclusive billionaire Arthur Kensington leaves entire $30 billion fortune to unknown grandniece. The headlines were splashed across every major news outlet: the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Forbes. Ava's name, once relegated to court documents and rejection emails, was suddenly the most talked-about name in the financial world. Paparazzi camped outside Maya's apartment building. Reporters shouted questions at her whenever she dared to peek outside. Her face, a grainy photo pulled from her old, forgotten social media profile, was everywhere. She had gone from invisible to infamous overnight. Daniel saw it on the large screen mounted on his office wall, the one usually tuned to the stock market ticker. He was in the middle of a meeting boasting about Q3 projections when Ava's face appeared on screen next to the Kensington Industries logo. He stopped mid-sentence. The coffee cup in his hand trembled, rattling against its saucer. His initial reaction was stunned disbelief, followed by a surge of white-hot rage that was so intense it made him dizzy. Ava. His sentimental, naive, financially illiterate ex-wife was the heir to the Kensington empire. The absurdity of it was almost comical. He had discarded her like a piece of outdated hardware, only to find out she was the key to the entire system. All his striving, his ruthless ambition, his carefully constructed success, it all felt like a child's sandcastle next to the mountain of gold that had just fallen into her lap. His mind began to churn the anger, quickly solidifying into cold, hard calculation. There had to be a way to get his hands on it. There had to be. Meanwhile, Ava was living in a surreal bubble. Mr. Peterson had moved her from Maya's apartment to a secure penthouse suite at the Carlisle Hotel under an assumed name. He had hired a private security detail and a public relations team to manage the media storm. Her life was no longer her own. It was a series of scheduled meetings, briefings, and legal consultations. Her first visit to Kensington Tower was the most intimidating experience of her life. The building itself was a monument to power, a shard of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. Mr. Peterson escorted her through a private entrance to the top-floor executive offices. The air was different up here, rarefied and still. He led her into a cavernous boardroom. A long, polished obsidian table was surrounded by 20 chairs. Seated around it were the executive board members of Kensington Industries, the dozen or so people who ran the day-to-day operations of the global empire. They were all older, impeccably dressed, and their faces were a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and outright hostility. Mr. Peterson made the introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Ava Collins. Ava felt 100 eyes dissecting her. Her simple black dress felt like a cheap costume. These were titans of industry, people who negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast. And she was the woman who just a week ago was designing a logo for a bakery. A man at the head of the table with silver hair and a stern expression stood up. Mr. Peterson had briefed her on him. This was Gregory Finch, the chief operating officer, Arthur Kensington's longtime second-in-command. He had expected to be named chairman of the board. Ms. Collins. Finch began, his voice smooth but with an edge of steel. Welcome to Kensington Industries. This is all quite a surprise. Arthur was a man of many secrets, it would seem. The implication was clear: she was the biggest and most unwelcome secret of all. We have, of course, prepared a full briefing for you on our current ventures, our portfolio, and our 5-year strategic plan. He continued, gesturing to a stack of binders thick enough to stop a bullet. Though I imagine much of this will be rather complex for a newcomer. The condescension was palpable. He saw her not as the new owner, but as an obstacle, a problem to be managed. Ava's throat was dry. She looked at the faces around the table. They were waiting for her to falter to prove their assumptions right. They saw a lottery winner, a lucky fool who had stumbled into a world she didn't understand. She thought of Daniel, of the way he had dismissed her as too sentimental for success. The same feeling of being underestimated, of being erased, washed over her. But this time something was different. The fear was still there, but beneath it a tiny ember of anger began to glow. They didn't know her. They didn't know the woman who had worked 80-hour weeks to get a startup off the ground, who had balanced books and negotiated with vendors and designed entire marketing campaigns from her kitchen table. She met Gregory Finch's gaze directly. Her voice when she spoke was quiet but steady. "Thank you, Mr. Finch. I appreciate the briefing documents. I'm a fast learner." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "I know this is unexpected for all of you. It's unexpected for me, too. I won't pretend to know everything about Kensington Industries today. But I promise you this, I am not here to run this company into the ground. This is my family's legacy, and I intend to honor it. Now," she said, her voice gaining a new firmness, "why don't you start by telling me about the logistics division's profit margin decline last quarter?" A stunned silence fell over the room. They had expected tears or nervous platitudes. They had not expected a direct, intelligent question. Mr. Peterson, standing by the door, allowed himself a small, private smile. The Miller grit, he thought. It was there after all. Ava had survived the first test. But she knew with chilling certainty that the battles were just beginning. Daniel Fletcher watched the clip of Ava's first press conference for the 10th time. It was a short, carefully managed event held on the steps of Kensington Tower. She looked different. Her hair was styled, she wore a sophisticated navy blue power suit, and she stood flanked by Walter Peterson and a team of imposing security guards. She spoke calmly and confidently, answering the reporters' vetted questions with a poise he had never seen in her. "I am committed to upholding the values and vision of my great-uncle Arthur Kensington," she said, her voice steady. "My primary focus is to learn to listen to the incredible team already in place, and to ensure a stable and prosperous future for Kensington Industries." Every word was like a needle under his skin. This wasn't the broken woman he had left on the courthouse steps. This was someone new, someone powerful, and she was wielding the power that should have been his. His rage had now cooled into a singular, obsessive purpose. He had been cheated. In his mind, her inheritance was an extension of their marital assets. She must have known about this connection, this potential windfall. She must have hidden it from him from the court. It was the only explanation that made sense to his narcissistic mind. He summoned Mitchell Vance, his piranha of a lawyer, to his gleaming minimalist office overlooking the city. "She hid it," Daniel said, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. "There's no other way. She knew she was in line to inherit billions, and she played the victim in court to cheat me out of my rightful share." Vance, ever the opportunist, saw the potential for the biggest payday of his career. "Fraudulent misrepresentation during divorce proceedings is a serious claim, Daniel. If we can prove she had prior knowledge of her relationship with Kensington and the potential for inheritance, we could petition the court to set aside the original judgment and reevaluate the division of assets." "Then do it," Daniel snapped. "I want half. It's rightfully mine. I was the one who taught her about business. I built her up. She owes me." The legal motion landed on Walter Peterson's desk a week later. It was an audacious, slanderous document accusing Ava of a complex and calculated fraud. Daniel's legal team claimed she had orchestrated the entire divorce to cut him out just before her inheritance came through. They demanded a full half of the Kensington estate. The news exploded, creating a new, more scandalous media cycle. The narrative was intoxicating, the self-made tech mogul swindled by his secretive, manipulative ex-wife. Daniel went on a media tour, giving interviews to sympathetic hosts. He painted himself as the heartbroken victim, a man who had been betrayed on an unimaginable scale. "I loved her," he said to a daytime talk show host, his face a mask of sorrow. "I thought we were building a life together. To find out that she was hiding this massive secret. It's not about the money. It's about the trust. It's about the lies." The public, always hungry for a story of a wealthy woman being taken down a peg, began to turn. Online forums lit up with comments calling Ava a gold digger and a con artist. The tide of public opinion, which had briefly been in her favor as an underdog, was now turning against her. Ava was in a strategy meeting about Kensington's European shipping routes when Mr. Peterson brought her the news. She read the headlines on the tablet he handed her, her face draining of color. The audacity of Daniel's lies was breathtaking. He had the gall to talk about trust after what he had done to her. Her first instinct was to hide, to let the PR team handle it. The public scrutiny was suffocating. But then the anger returned, colder and sharper this time. He had taken her past, and now he was trying to steal her future. He was attacking her character, her integrity, the very core of who she was. She would not let him. "Walter," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I want the best litigation team you can find. I don't care what it costs. I want to fight this, and I want to win. I want you to dig into every corner of Daniel's life. His business dealings, his accounts, everything he hid from me during our marriage. He wants to talk about lies. Let's show the world who the real liar is." Mr. Peterson nodded, a glint of approval in his eye. "I've already made some calls. We will assemble a team that will bury him in discovery requests." The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer just a divorce case. It was a war. Daniel had his fabricated story and the court of public opinion. Ava had the truth and the unlimited resources of Kensington Industries. As she stood in the boardroom, looking out over the city that was now hers to command, she felt a profound shift within herself. She was no longer just defending her inheritance. She was defending her name, her history, and her right to exist outside of Daniel Fletcher's shadow. The timid woman from the first courtroom was gone for good. In her place was a queen ready to defend her castle. The legal battle was a war of attrition. Daniel's team filed motion after motion, burying Ava's lawyers in paperwork, hoping to overwhelm her to force a settlement. But they had severely underestimated their opponent. Ava, backed by the formidable power of Covington and Sterling, met every challenge head-on. She spent her days in boardroom meetings and her evenings in strategy sessions with her legal team. The two worlds, business and law, began to merge. In the boardroom, Gregory Finch and his allies continued to test her. They saw the lawsuit as a distraction, a sign of her unsuitability to lead. They presented her with deliberately complex financial models and peppered her with jargon-laden questions, trying to catch her off guard, to expose her ignorance. "But, Collins," Finch said during one particularly grueling meeting about a potential acquisition of a smaller tech firm, "given the leveraged buyout structure and the EBITDA multiples, do you truly believe the debt financing is sustainable, especially with the current market volatility?" The rest of the board watched, expecting her to defer to him or look to her advisors for help. In the early days, she might have. But weeks of intensive tutoring from Mr. Peterson and her own relentless late-night studying had armed her. She had devoured every book on corporate finance and business strategy she could get her hands on. She didn't hesitate. "The market volatility is precisely why this is a prime opportunity, Gregory." She countered, her tone even. "Their stock is undervalued. Our internal analysis shows their core technology is sound and has synergy with our own R&D division. The debt is manageable if we restructure our own asset allocation, specifically by divesting from the underperforming real estate portfolio in the Midwest, something I believe you yourself recommended 6 months ago." Finch was visibly taken aback. He had not expected such a detailed strategic response. He had certainly not expected her to use his own past recommendations against him. Around the table, a few of the more neutral board members exchanged impressed glances. Judith, a sharp, discerning woman who oversaw the company's philanthropic arm, offered a small approving nod. Ava was not just a figurehead. She was learning the game, and she was learning it fast. Her confidence growing, Ava started taking a more active role. She didn't just listen, she questioned. During a review of the company's logistics division, she noticed a series of unusual payments to a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. Finch and the CFO dismissed them as standard operational expenses. Ava's instincts, honed by Daniel's financial betrayals, screamed that something was wrong. "I want a full independent audit of that division and its connection to this shell company," she declared, overriding Finch's protests. While the auditors went to work, her legal team was making its own discoveries. The discovery process in her lawsuit against Daniel forced him to open his books. And what they found was staggering. He hadn't just hidden a few assets during the divorce. He had built a labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell companies systematically siphoning money from Innovate Dynamics for years, long before he had even filed for divorce. He had been planning his exit and her erasure for a very long time. More importantly, they found a clear money trail connecting Daniel's offshore accounts to the very same Cayman Islands shell corporation that Ava had flagged in the Kensington audit. The pieces clicked into place. Gregory Finch had been feeding Daniel inside information about Kensington's shipping routes and bidding processes. In return, Daniel was giving him kickbacks laundered through the shell company. Finch wasn't just trying to undermine Ava to gain control of the company. He was actively trying to destroy it from within, colluding with her greatest enemy to do it. He had seen Ava as a naive fool, but in his arrogance he had grown sloppy, believing no one would ever look closely at his operations. Ava convened an emergency board meeting. This time there was no trace of nervousness in her demeanor. She stood at the head of the table, not as an inheritor but as a commander. For the past several months, she began, her voice ringing with cold authority, "I have been subjected to tests of my knowledge and my leadership. Some of you have questioned my right to be here. Today I have a question for one of you." Her eyes locked onto Gregory Finch. On a large screen behind her, she projected the auditor's report, a damning web of transactions, emails, and offshore accounts that connected Finch directly to Daniel Fletcher. "Mr. Finch," she said as the blood drained from his face, "can you explain these standard operational expenses to the board?" The room was deathly silent. Finch sputtered, trying to form a denial, but the evidence was irrefutable. His betrayal was laid bare for all to see. The man who had judged her unworthy was exposed as a common corporate thief and traitor. It was a stunning, brutal checkmate. Gregory Finch's fall was as swift as it was spectacular. He was fired by the board in a unanimous vote, escorted out of the building by security, and promptly met by federal agents in the lobby, thanks to an anonymous tip from Covington and Sterling. The scandal rocked the financial world, but Ava's decisive action and transparent handling of the crisis earned her something she hadn't had before: the unwavering respect of her board and the industry. She hadn't just stumbled into power. She had earned it. The revelations about Finch and Daniel's collusion completely torpedoed Daniel's lawsuit. Faced with irrefutable evidence of his own perjury, financial fraud, and corporate espionage, his case crumbled. Not only was his motion to reopen the divorce thrown out, but the evidence Ava's team had uncovered triggered a full-scale investigation by the SEC and the IRS into Innovate Dynamics. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened when Daniel, stripped of his bravado and facing financial ruin and possible jail time, had the audacity to call her. "Ava, you have to help me," he pleaded, his voice thin and desperate, a pathetic imitation of the confident man who had left her on the pavement. "You can call them off. We had good years together, didn't we? Think of what we built." Ava stood in her office, the office that had once belonged to Arthur Kensington, looking out at the city skyline. She felt a profound, cleansing sense of peace. The anger was gone, replaced by a cool, distant pity. "What we built, Daniel," she replied, her voice calm and final. "You taught me a very valuable lesson. You taught me that some things are built on lies, on a foundation of sand, and they are destined to collapse. I, on the other hand, am building something on a foundation of stone. Goodbye, Daniel." She hung up the phone, severing the final tie to her old life. The news came a few weeks later. Innovate Dynamics was forced into bankruptcy. Daniel Fletcher, the self-made visionary, was facing a barrage of federal charges. He lost everything: the company, the house, the Porsche, and his freedom. The karmic justice was absolute. Months passed. Ava thrived. She wasn't just the owner of Kensington Industries. She was its leader. She had a natural instinct for business tempered with an empathy her great-uncle never had. She started a new philanthropic branch of the company, overseen by Judith, focused on providing grants and support to women starting their own businesses, ensuring that other women would have the chances she never got. She even reached out to Mrs. Gable from the bakery, whose kind email had been a pinprick of light in her darkest hour, and had her company's foundation invest in expanding the small bakery into a beloved local chain. She wasn't the woman Daniel had tried to erase, nor was she simply the lucky recipient of a billionaire's fortune. She had forged a new identity in the crucible of betrayal and boardroom battles. She was Ava Collins, a woman who had been to rock bottom and had built an empire upon it. One evening, Walter Peterson found her standing in front of a newly commissioned portrait of Arthur Kensington that she had hung in the main lobby. "He would have been proud of you," Walter said quietly. "Prouder than you can imagine." Ava smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "I think for the first time I'm proud of myself." She had lost everything only to find that she had everything she ever needed within herself all along. The money and the power were just tools. Her resilience, her intelligence, her Miller grit, that was the true inheritance. And with it she was just getting started. 1 year later, the name Ava Collins was no longer synonymous with scandal or surprise inheritance. It was synonymous with vision. The frantic media storm had long since subsided, replaced by the steady, respectful hum of the financial press tracking Kensington Industries' innovative new trajectory. The woman who had entered the boardroom as a terrified inheritor now chaired its meetings with a quiet authority that left no room for doubt. Her office, once a museum of Arthur Kensington's austere tastes, had been subtly changed. While the grand mahogany desk remained as a symbol of the company's foundation, the walls now featured works by up-and-coming female artists, and blueprints for new projects were often spread across the large conference table. Ava had not erased the past. She was building upon it, adding her own layers, her own color. "The projections are solid," a board member was saying, pointing to a chart on the large screen. "The divestment from the Midwest portfolio and reallocation into renewable energy tech has already yielded a 12% return, far exceeding our initial forecast." "Excellent," Ava said, her eyes scanning the data. "But I didn't call this meeting to review our successes. I called it to propose our next one." She clicked a button and the screen changed. It now displayed a sleek, modern logo with the words, "The Kensington Catalyst Fund." "For the past century," she began, her voice resonating with passion, "Kensington Industries has been a titan of building things. Skyscrapers, shipping fleets, technological infrastructure. Now I want us to build something else: futures." She outlined her vision. The Kensington Catalyst Fund would be the largest venture capital fund in the world, dedicated solely to supporting female-founded startups. It would provide not just capital, but also mentorship from Kensington's top executives, access to their legal teams, and a network of industry connections. "There is an untapped reservoir of talent in the world," Ava explained, looking at each board member. "Brilliant minds with revolutionary ideas who are consistently overlooked and underfunded. We have the resources and the responsibility to change that. This isn't just philanthropy, it's the smartest investment we can make for the future of innovation." Judith, who now sat at Ava's right hand as the head of the new Social Impact Division, smiled warmly. The rest of the board, once skeptical of Ava's every move, was now captivated. They had seen her instincts and intellect transform the company. They trusted her. The vote to approve the $500 million initial funding was unanimous. That evening, Ava met Maya at a quiet restaurant in the West Village, a world away from the gleaming towers of Wall Street. It was their weekly tradition, a grounding ritual that kept Ava connected to the woman she was before the billions. The Kensington Catalyst Fund, Maya said, shaking her head in awe after Ava told her the news. You're really doing it. You're changing the whole game. We're trying to, Ava said with a small smile, sipping her wine. I just think about where I was, about how I poured every idea I had into a business only to be told I was just sentimental. I want to make sure no other woman with a brilliant idea has to hear that. Their conversation was interrupted by a news alert on Maya's phone. She glanced at it and her expression shifted. Oh, wow. What is it? Ava asked. Maya turned the phone around. The headline read, Former Tech CEO Daniel Fletcher, sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. There was a photo of Daniel looking gaunt and defeated in a cheap suit being led from the courthouse in handcuffs. Ava looked at the image for a long moment. There was no triumph, no surge of satisfaction. There was only a quiet, profound sense of finality. He was a ghost from another life, a closed chapter in a book she had long since finished reading. He got what he deserved, Maya said softly. Yes, he did. Ava agreed, her gaze turning back to her friend, to the present. Now tell me about that cute doctor you met. The official launch of the Catalyst Fund was a major event. Ava stood on a stage, not in front of reporters hungry for a scandal, but in front of a room filled with hopeful entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and innovators. She felt no fear, only a deep sense of purpose. A legacy is not just what you inherit, she said, her voice clear and strong. It is defined by what you build with it. Today we lay the first stone of a new foundation. A foundation upon which a new generation of leaders, visionaries, and builders will create a world that is more innovative, more equitable, and more brilliant than the one we know today. Later that night, she stood by the panoramic window of her office, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of possibilities. The weight of the skyscraper no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a launching pad. She had not only taken control of her inheritance, but she had also transformed it into a reflection of her own spirit. She was no longer just the keeper of a legacy. She was the architect of a new one that would empower thousands and change the world, one brilliant idea at a time. The story of the wronged ex-wife was over. The story of Ava Collins, the builder of futures, had just begun. Ava's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. It's a testament to the incredible strength that can be discovered when we are pushed to our absolute limits. She went from the devastation of a brutal divorce where her contributions were erased and her future stolen to the helm of a global empire. But her victory wasn't just in the inheritance. It was in reclaiming her own narrative. She proved that integrity, resilience, and intelligence are worth more than any stock portfolio. The man who saw her as nothing lost everything, while she who was left with nothing found her true worth and built a new legacy. Her journey shows us that sometimes losing everything is the first step toward gaining a world you never knew was possible. What did you think of Ava's incredible turnaround? Do you believe in karmic justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story of resilience and empowerment, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless.